Welcome to Sandy Draws, where I will be using Polychromos pencils to create a carrot drawing. And yes, I am going to be drawing this complex one, but before we start, I'm going to show you the way that I'm going to be handling light, but with one carrot, a very simple carrot that you could draw as well. There is a sketch for it over in my posts, and there's also a link to it in the doobly-doo down below. But we're going to do one carrot first, and then I'll show you how that plays into all the carrots. I'm Sandy Allnock, and I am an art teacher. And if you're interested after this video in more classes with deeper teaching than this, then feel free to subscribe to the channel as well as go visit art-classes.com. So today I'm going to draw this carrot, and I'm starting off by using a couple of different yellows and yellow oranges to just put some base color in it. And most normal people would just put a shadow on, say, the bottom side, assuming the light's coming from the top, and that would be it. But what I want to talk about is bounced light, because bounced light is something that can make your drawing very interesting. And sometimes you can see it very clearly in a photograph of something, but not always. What I find helps is to put a little bit of kind of a mid-tone color on all the sides, not as an outline, make it have soft edges like this, leaving the highlight at the top like you normally would, and then start building in other colors. But I'm building in this darker orange color, leaving a little bit of the lighter color at the bottom. And while you don't see a whole lot of it right now, you'll see it develop as I add layers. With Polychromos pencils, these are oil-based pencils. The best way to use them is with lots and lots of very light layers. It means no pressure. Because as soon as you start using pressure, you're going to have trouble getting any kind of good blending to happen. So here I'm adding more of a dark rust kind of a color. And all these colors I will have listed over on my Substack. So if you're looking for exactly which colors that I'm using, you'll see that over there. But here I'm using a pencil sharpener to get my pencil really, really sharp. You'll notice if you're using a textured paper like Stonehenge, which is what I'm using, you end up with little white dots. And that's what people are usually trying to get rid of. They want to blend it away. And that's where a lot of folks get into using blending stumps and, blending solutions and that sort of thing. I prefer not to use them if I can. But what that requires is just some patience. So I'm adding layer after layer after layer. And they're very light layers, not doing very much to it. This Stonehenge paper has a kind of texture that almost pulls the pigment off of the pencil. If you're using a really smooth paper like a Bristol, you could end up with not much of that pigment being scraped off. So you have a tendency to try to press harder. So as you can see, I'm adding deeper and deeper layers, so I'm getting more contrast. I've also added some semi-line work in the carrot itself, all of those striations in the carrot. And I'm going to slowly get rid of them. I'm slowly carving into them. But notice at the beginning, I colored the entire thing in yellows and oranges. So those highlights are not going to be white. An object like this, unless it has droplets of water on it, is probably not going to have any white in it. So I'm just adding those dark values. And I go back and forth between using this blue-violet color and using the rust colors for the shadows. That's giving me more contrast. And the more contrast you have, the more realistic it ends up looking. And I know most people are trying for some kind of realism, and that is going to help you out because complementary colors like these are really good at doing that kind of adding realism. Then I'm going to add a cast shadow. Cast shadow is the shadow that an object makes when it hits the ground. So I'm using a gray pencil right under the carrot, like immediately under it is where it's going to be dark, and then it's going to get lighter as it fades out. The leaf section I'm going to call deep shadows, and typically that's called negative drawing, but it scares people. So let's call it deep shadows instead, shall we? And what I'm going to start off with, again, is a light value for the first coverage on the area. And I want to make little frilly leaves coming off the end of these stalks, these stems. So in order to make the stems look like stems, I'm using a darker color in between to make it look like there's a whole bunch of stems coming out of the carrot. And then as we get off into the very tiny kind of fussy leaves, I'm starting with a mid-tone color for those because the leaves are going to be on the darker side, as you saw in the photo when the video started. So I'm going to put down this color, and it could be a cool color. It could be a warm color. This happens to be a warmish kind of green. And then I'm adding a coolish green into it and adding the shadows into the places behind some of those little leaves. And I know it's difficult when people say, how do I draw around things? Well, picture that thing drawn in a lighter color with nothing behind it. And you're just drawing the color behind it, basically. But I'm just kind of scribbling almost. I'm just scribbling in intentional ways. This is not like trying to outline every single leaf and figure out what every single leaf looks like. And especially in the longer drawing, I was not about to get into every single leaf. So it's a much more expressive way to draw something, just to give that sense of the deep shadows that are within it that makes you think that there's texture to it. And here I'm adding not only black into the leaves at the top, but a little bit of black into that shadow, and look at how it suddenly pops on the page. The drawing of the entire bunch of carrots are going to use the very same techniques. And it's going to be sped up because this is several days worth of drawing, so I don't really want to be here the entire day. But I do hope you'll stick with it because I think there's enough tips in here to be worth your time. I started with that basic set of colors. Some of them, there's one that's kind of a dusky sort of yellow ochreish color. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it will be on Substack. And I use that for the base of the wooden board that these carrots are sitting on. But I used all the other colors that are in the carrots to do the shading, including that purple. So purple is going to be a complementary color. That blue-violet is a complementary color to all these oranges and yellows. And it's going to act as a really nice shadow. And it's a more lively shadow than you would get from, say, a dark brown kind of color or a black or a gray. So I like to use those complements that way because of it. And if you're not familiar with the color wheel, then I've got a gajillion classes that you could study from. If you're brand new or recently newish to colored pencil, I do have a colored pencil jumpstart class that is fantastic and will teach you a lot about color theory as well as how to use your colored pencils. So here I'm using negative drawing around that carrot. See how this carrot is going to be pushed to the background so that it looks like it's underneath of the carrot on top. But I'm going to keep layering on the carrot on top as well. I just put some color into the one in the background because the one on top is going to be seen in context with what's behind it. And all of these carrots, as I started doing the drawing from the left side over to the right, kept adapting. I kept making one area darker, another area darker. And throughout this, I challenged myself to not use an eraser at all. So I didn't use any erasing. This is all done by just layering the pencil to slowly get darker and darker and darker. The object behind doesn't have to be completely done first, as long as you get some value in there so that you know the values you want to attach to the next section. And otherwise, you could just end up with a big flood of orange in here and not be able to even see your pencil lines from your original sketch anymore, which you'll see that mine are very, very light. I keep them extremely pale because I don't want them to show in my final drawing. So here I'm getting in there with the darker brown pencils to push that carrot, that one carrot, way into the back. I want it to be at the bottom. There's no light hitting it. And I've got all that beautiful light on the carrot on top, but the left side of it is a little bit too bright. So I might need to occasionally drop in and darken that. And as I develop the other carrots, different ones are going to have different amounts of that bounce light on them. So I'm just kind of playing with it as I develop the drawing. I'm not wedded to the photo anymore. I'm not looking at every bit of it to try to see exactly where every single shadow goes. But I was looking at it enough to see how dark are the shadows going to be in between those carrots? How dark does the board get in between the carrots? And how does the light affect each one of them, so I know which one to push back a little bit further so the end of it sticks out forward and the top part of it goes underneath the other carrots that are piled on top. It was just a lovely practice time to just sit there and watch the dimension develop as I added more and more layers of more colors. And even at the very end, I found myself going back in and adding in even more contrast in particular spots. There are some places on your photo where you're just going to see there is no difference in value between, say, the carrot and the portion of the board that it's next to. And you can add more to it by using these techniques, or you can just decide you're going to go exactly with what's on the picture itself. Now, in this corner, I decided to make that stripe on the board that's in the upper left. I continued it on throughout the board as though the wood has that darker color going all the way across it. That wasn't what I saw in the photo, but I have the option to do it because I'm the artist. I can interpret that the way that I want. And now we're on to the leaves. And again, this is a cacophony of leaves. It's like way too much for your brain to handle. So what I ended up doing was the same thing I did on the small carrot, that small practice carrot. And I just started blocking in an area. This time I decided to do that with a cooler type of green color. Part of the joy of making art is literally coming up with your own color combinations for something like this. If I were to try to replicate the exact colors that are here in every single leaf, then there's no point in me making a drawing from this photograph because the photograph is already done. It's already beautiful. But I was able to add more fun light to those carrots, and I can add more fun colors into all the greens by coming up with my own approach to it. And you can come up with your own approach to it as well. You don't have to replicate something exactly in order to come up with a lovely drawing. The one thing that is a caveat to that is that you do need to have some understanding of what you're trying for and learning how to balance warms and cools together in a drawing. This would be a great exercise for that. Just practice drawing anything that has a whole lot of one thing in it and go back and forth between warms and cools and see what it takes to layer them. Which color should be on top versus which color should be underneath. And I kept trying it differently in different areas of this entire section. It was just a big old practice to see what I could make work. I used the negative drawing, adding the darks in between each of the sections. And I was looking at the picture just to get an idea of what kinds of shapes to draw, but I wasn't trying to replicate every leaf. It's a very small drawing, and it, is nearly impossible to be super specific and try to make every leaf that way. But I tried to pick a few of the stems and make sure I had some stems in there. And then a couple of the leaves that are on top, those are the ones that are going to matter the most. The ones that are on top are the ones that I tried to make sure I kept in leaf shape. And as I went through this whole thing, the same way as I did with the carrots, I would go back after I finished one section, work into another section. I would add a little bit more warms or a little bit more cools, depending on what would balance out the drawing. So if you bite off something more than you can chew, like this, which is like, this was a lot more than I was quite prepared for. But if you bite off something more than you can chew, consider it a great practice. It's an opportunity to start playing with things that you want to learn. If you want to learn how to do negative drawing, choose something that has some negative drawing areas in it. And then settle down, take your time. This is sped up, so don't worry. This is not how fast I draw. I went days on this drawing and just kept going back over and over different areas. I would push different sections back behind others in order to try to make these leaves look like they were dimensional. So I commend you to go draw a carrot. You can use my sketch or you can just do it yourself. The colors are all listed on my Substack. And while you're there, you can subscribe to Substack. You can do it for free. I put out videos twice a week, drawing videos on Tuesdays, and on Saturdays, watercolor videos on my Sandy Paints channel. So you'll get both of those if you become a subscriber. And the sharpener that I'm using, by the way, is just a handheld sharpener. It just happens to be a new one. So if your sharpener is getting dull and you're not getting really sharp points on your pencils, just go get one of those little quick throwaway ones and you'll have a sharp blade left for the rest of your pencil drawing. So there are my 2 carrot drawings. Let me know what you think if you're going to try this carrot yourself, because I'd love to see yours. I'd love to see how you handle that bounce light. It's really fun to practice, and I will have a step-by-step with pictures over on Substack in addition to those colors. So thank you for joining me. Hit the like button on the way out if you learned something from this, and subscribe if you haven't already, because there is a lot more drawing fun coming, because I have a lot more colors that need to be used. And yeah, that's a lot of fun. Supplies are all listed in the doobly-doo, as well as the link to Substack. And I will see you again next Tuesday. So in the meantime, get out there and draw yourself a carrot, because it's super fun. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.